Welcome back to Booklight. We'll begin with opening prayer. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Howdy, everyone. Good to see all of you. Today we'll be seeing the next portion of our Sadhana Pancakam taken by 3 of our Chyks. And we'll introduce one by one and they'll go. But first we'll also do a chanting of the full verse together, so no need for lead and repeat. That way we settle into it, and then I'll hand it off to our first Chyk. All right, so first verse of Sadhana Pancakam. Vedo nityam adhiyatam taduditam karma svanushthiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajatam papoga paridhuyatam bhavasuke dosho nusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrahaturnam vinirgamyatam. So now I'll hand it off to our very first Chyk of the evening. We have Sadhana of our Booklight team. Sadhana is currently a software engineer in the Bay Area, California, and she's part of the Chyk San Jose Chyk group. So Hariyam Sadhana, we're looking forward.
Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Hari Om, my pranams and gratitude to Shubhani ji, Amar ji, and our Booklight team for giving me this opportunity to share my reflections with you all today. Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji began Sadhana Pancakam by telling us to study the Vedas daily. He then says to perform the actions described diligently. Now he further explains how should we perform those actions. He says, Tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi. Apachitihi means as worship or as puja. Vidhiyatam means to dedicate. To who? To Isha, or the Lord. So what does this mean? This means that we should dedicate our actions fully to Bhagavan. That the intention of my actions should be that it's serving him rather than just for myself. So I'll first share some thoughts on why we should dedicate our actions to Bhagavan, who we're referring to when we say we should dedicate our actions, and how we can cultivate this attitude in our lifestyle. So why should we dedicate our actions? All of our actions come from desires and that are prompted by our vasanas. This is the blueprint of tendencies that we're all born with. This blueprint points to certain tendencies that create desires for a certain type of food or a certain type of drink or a certain activity, and then I'm prompted to consume that food or participate in that activity. And these actions prompted by desires are binding. So the more that one engages in that desire, the more that they'll be bound to continue that. If we look at Ravana, he lusted so much after Mother Sita that this vasana kept growing. And when we're deep in a binding towards a vasana, it causes delusion or confusion, and one is unable to evaluate what is right from wrong. So it caused Ravana to do all these wrong actions. He disguised himself, he kidnapped Mother Sita, he sacrificed his sons, put the whole kingdom in danger. And he wasn't able to listen to anyone, even when his wife Mandodari was telling him that what he's doing is wrong. And where did that eventually lead him? It only led him to his own sorrow. So being bound in these desire-prompted actions will only lead us to sorrow. So how do we prevent this? Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya Ji suggests that we should dedicate actions to a higher altar. And what is the higher altar than that of the infinite, that of Bhagavan? In this same story, we see an example of how we can act. And we see this in Hanumanji. Hanumanji did everything in service of Bhagavan Ram. He had no intentions for himself, no desires for himself. And actually, we see something else in Hanumanji. We don't hear much of his glories or amazing feats of Hanumanji's when he's serving in Kishkinda, serving the former king Sugriv. But once he meets Bhagavan Rama, we hear all these glorious stories of him jumping across the sea, delivering the ring to Mother Sita, burning all of Lanka. So when the altar was raised higher, there was more inspiration, more potential. So when our worship is towards something, or our dedication of our actions is towards something that's very limited, like another being, then the potential also becomes limited. But if the dedication is towards that which is unlimited, then our potential is also unlimited. Why else should we act as worship? When we do anything with dedication towards a higher goal, it makes us more disciplined. For example, one who has the goal to run a marathon will naturally develop this discipline to practice often, to eat healthier, because they have that conviction, I'm going to run this marathon, and I know that I need to stay in shape to do so. So they naturally develop those habits. In the same way, when we act as worship, we naturally become more conscious of our actions. I only want the best for Bhagavan. I wouldn't take dead flowers or rotten fruit to the temple. I would only offer what is produced from my best effort. And we see this in Hanumanji as well. Hanumanji had leapt across the sea, and the mountain Mainak Parvat appeared and said, "Hey monkey, why don't you take a rest?" And Hanumanji, he could have rested, but he said, "No, I cannot rest until Bhagavan's work is complete." So the highest potential within us is expressed, and we begin to develop these qualities that will help us in our spiritual quest, like discipline and fortitude, being able to sacrifice for this service to Bhagavan. And all of this leads to purifying this mind. Lastly, why else should we act as worship? When we act as worship, the results become so much greater, and they bring so much joy just to the people who are doing the action. Whenever we go to the temple, the food at the temple always tastes so much better because it's made with that offering, that intention to be served for Bhagavan. And it brings so much joy just to the people who are doing that seva, and it benefits so many people. Okay, now that we've heard some of these reasons why we should act as worship, you might say, yeah, Hanumanji had it easy though. He had Bhagavan Rama as his right in front of him. But where is my Lord to serve? That's where we have it wrong. If my worship, if my dedication is only to Bhagavan, is only to him as a form or an icon, it's very limited, because Bhagavan is this whole totality. Everyone and everything is an expression of Bhagavan alone. Our friends, our family, the community, the animals, the ecosystem are all an expression of Bhagavan. In Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 10, Bhagavan Krishna says, Yadhyad vibhuti matsattvam shrimad urjitamevava. Whatever you see as beautiful, as glorious, tatta deva vagachatvam mama tejoncha sambhavam. Know that beauty, that glory to be of me. So this consciousness principle, this Satchitananda, is in everything in this whole world. And when we remember that as such, all of our actions become more divine. So our actions don't need to be amazing feats, like jumping across the sea. Since Bhagavan is everywhere, any action can be done with this attitude of worship. It's less about the action that's done and more, the attitude in which that's performed. I work as a software engineer, and sometimes when I'm writing up code, I'm wondering, how is this that I'm writing serving Bhagavan? But after reflecting on this with the guidance of some of my teachers, I realize we often take for granted how necessary technology is. And especially we're noticing it in this pandemic situation, how much we need it. And a lot of our software works like a circuit. If one piece breaks, then it breaks that whole flow of the infrastructure. So even this small piece of code that I'm writing is impacting the whole flow of this software technology that so many of our communities in the world is reliant on. So we don't necessarily need to change what we do, but we may perhaps need to change the attitude in which we do it. So we talked about what it means to act as worship, why we should dedicate our actions, who is that Lord that we should worship, and now that we understand we should dedicate, how can we cultivate this attitude? I'll share 3 R's that I've reflected on. The first is remember. We should remember Bhagavan more. All that I'm able to do, actions I'm able to serve in a certain way are possible with Bhagavan's grace only. And in that action, it's also Bhagavan that I'm serving. So the more that I see that divine within me and the divine expression in all that actions that I'm doing, the more those actions will become divine. And we see this when we chant Brahmarpanam before eating. It reminds us that even this action of eating is a yajna, is a worship towards Bhagavan. Another thing that I find helps me is to keep a constant japa or chant a stotram during the actions that sort of go on autopilot, like cooking or cleaning or showering, because it helps me to focus on Bhagavan and realize that even these simple daily actions are a worship towards Bhagavan. Next, we can raise the intention of the action. Sometimes we get caught up in the action that we forget the intention. If my intention of exercise is to look a certain way or get a perfect body, then the action won't feel like worship, and it may end up feeling more stressful. But if my intention of exercise is to keep this body healthy so that I can serve Bhagavan, I'll be less caught up in how it's making this body look and satisfied with even a simple workout that's left me feeling healthy. So we should evaluate and see if these intentions of the actions need to be raised. And lastly, release expectations of the results. It's expectations of our results that cause stress and sorrow. If I have a certain expectation that this action should end up this way, and I'm anxious about if it will happen that way, or if it doesn't happen that way, then I'll feel sorrow when it doesn't turn out the way I thought. But when offering to Bhagavan, we can't ask for anything in return. After the puja is over, the Panditji hands me the banana. I can't say, actually, Panditji, I wanted the orange. He'll give me a look. Whatever Bhagavan gives is the deserved result of the action. So I must let go of my expectations for the result and do my best as an offering to Bhagavan, leave the rest. So to summarize, we said that we should dedicate our actions as a worship of Bhagavan. Why? Because we become less bound to these desires. The mind becomes purified as we gain qualities like discipline, determination, that will help us in our spiritual quest. And the results are more beneficial to all, bringing joy just by doing the action itself. And who should we serve? Bhagavan is this whole totality. So anyone and anything that we are already serving is serving Bhagavan. And in the same line, all of our actions can be performed with this attitude. And how can we cultivate this attitude more in our lives? I shared 3 R's. Remember Bhagavan more, raise the intention, and release expectations of the result. Hari Om. Thank you.
Hariam Sahana, that was so good. So wonderful to hear from you. Next, we'll have Anjali, who is a sophomore right now at CMU, Carnegie Mellon University. Growing up in New Jersey, now she's studying information systems at CMU. So Hariam Anjali.
Hari Om, everyone. Thank you so much, Sahana, for that great talk. I will do my best to follow it up. Okay, I'll begin now. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namaha. So the pada, or the half pada that we had this week, Tene Shasya Vidiyatam Apachitihi. So offer your work as worship to the Lord. This had me thinking in a lot of different ways, and the real question I came away with was why? Why should we offer our worship to the Lord? It got me thinking about why I do my work now. For what purpose do I currently work? And why should I transition that to working as worship, to working as God? And in reflecting, I realized that a lot of the work I do and a lot of the work people do in general is working in order to individually accomplish, working for personal appearance, personal gain. And that lifestyle, that mindset causes a lot of stress, a lot of emphasis on appearance building. And so one of the reasons that I came away with why should we work as worship is it translates our value of work away from our individual accomplishment to a higher altar, to serving others and to serving the totality that is the Lord. So in order to explain this concept further, I want to share a quick presentation that I put together. And for those of you that were here last week for Divya's presentation, this is very much inspired by that. So thank you, Divya. So in thinking about individual accomplishment and why we work, so a lot of the times we're working in a very appearance-based manner. So we work and we worry about things like our title, our salary, our awards, our reputation, all of these very material, temporary things that can signal to others how good we are, how worthy we are, how accomplished we are. And so in doing our work, we start working towards these things, these temporary things that can change in the blink of an eye. And for me, one example of working in this manner that came to mind very quickly was my LinkedIn. I spend far too much time on my LinkedIn, and it was a perfect example for me of working in a very appearance-based manner. Everything here is very strategically placed. I created my own banner. I put what I thought were my best accomplishments in the tagline. And this is a PowerPoint, so I can't scroll down, but if I were to scroll down, all of my accomplishments are listed in a way that it shows off to recruiters or whoever else looks at my profile what I think would impress them the most. And so many of the things that I do or many of the things I apply for can sometimes boil down to how does it look on LinkedIn? How does it look? How do I appear to others? And so that's the next step of the cycle. How does it look on LinkedIn? What do I look like to other people? And this is what we begin to worry about. Instead of working to serve a higher altar, we're working for ourselves, we're working for our own accomplishment, and we worry about what others think of us. And all of our future endeavors become about what people think of us. And so the way that I phrased this that made the most sense to me was that life then becomes a process of acquisition. It's I need to get this title, I need to get this salary, I need to get this because it'll make my reputation look better and I'll look better to other people. it's not about what can I give, what can I offer to the people who are in front of me, to the people in my community. That whole notion is taken away when you're living in a mindset where work isn't worship. Work is about your own individual accomplishment. And so finally, the next step, and one that I've personally experienced, is that you start to feel a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And this last one, worrying about the future. If you're constantly acquiring jobs, worrying about what it's going to look like for your appearance, well, once you acquire something, there's no satisfaction, there's no contentment, there's just, what can I get next? And how can I look even better than I already do? It's, again, what can I add to my LinkedIn? And so this cycle just continues to go, and the work you do isn't satisfying. It doesn't fulfill you, and because you're not at your best, not at your most fulfilled, it doesn't fulfill others. So in looking for a solution or a transition from this mindset to working as worship, the Bhagavad-Gita has all of the answers. So one verse stuck out in particular to me, which was chapter 2, verse 47, especially the first line. This reads, Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu katachana. And what this means is you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of the action. In this mindset, when you're focused on individual accomplishment and your appearance, all you worry about is the fruits of your action, not how you're working, the quality of your work, and who you're helping. And so, to me, the first step from transitioning from individual accomplishment to working as worship was something Shubhaniji mentioned last week. And that was beginning with gratitude. You need to recognize what you have. And if you'll notice, this is step 0. And I'll go through a 3-step process of how we can really transition from individual accomplishment to work as worship. But gratitude is step 0, because gratitude is the precursor to any other work as worship that you might pursue in the future. In an individual accomplishment, appearance-based mindset, there is no recognizing what you have. There is only worry about the future and what you can get. But in gratitude, there is a simple humility of recognizing what you have and what you can offer. Instead of simply focusing on what should I get next? What can I do next? So once gratitude is fulfilled, the next step is to dedicate your current actions to God. So in this step, you take whatever you're doing. For example, I am a student, as Amriji mentioned. And so for me, the step to take would be to take my education and offer it to God, my studies, going to class, and think of it as a form of worship. It would certainly make me pay attention in class a lot more than I do now. So that would be the first step for me, is taking whatever I'm doing currently, whatever path I'm pursuing, and dedicating that towards Bhagavan, instead of simply thinking, what am I even getting out of this class? Why can't I just do something else? I will take what I am doing at the current moment as worship and increase the quality of what I'm doing. However, in this step, there's still a lot of ego, a lot of doership. It's my actions that I'm dedicating to God, and I've chosen the specific actions. So the next step, as Shubhaniji mentioned last week, is to make the choice to become an instrument of God. And I bolded make the choice because it has to be conscious. It has to be very deliberate, making this choice and saying, I recognize that work is more than simply choosing what I like based on my own vasanas or my own desires. It's what can I offer to the world, and how can God work through me as an instrument to make that a reality for the people around me. So as Shubhaniji mentioned last week, becoming an instrument of God is letting God work through you. But then she mentioned, there is one final step. In this step too, there is still doership. You can go around bragging, I am the instrument of God, and there's still an element of pride in this step. But finally, the last step is when you simply become one with dedication. And for me personally, as someone who's still working on step 0, this step was particularly hard for me to grasp and understand. But what I think it means, to the best of my interpretation, is, your life and your actions, whatever you do, it's simply worship. Every action that you do is at the highest quality of action, because you're offering it to that which is everything, the totality that is Satchitananda. And there is no questioning, how can this benefit me? Where does my reputation come in? There's no questioning about how your actions look to the people around you. It's simply about acting in a way that is in accordance with helping others and offering everything you have to the highest altar of Satchitananda. So I'm going to stop sharing now and quickly summarize. My talk today was about how we work now and how we can transition our work from what it is currently into work as worship, as was stated in Sadhana Pancakam. And so I chose to talk about individual accomplishment and appearance-based work because a lot of what I feel like work is in the Western world is, how does it look towards others? And even within our own society of Indian Americans, a lot of the work is, how does it look towards others? And I talked about my LinkedIn because that's a prime example of catering your accomplishments and your skills to how it can appear towards other people. I then talked about the steps Shubhaniji mentioned last week into how we can transition from individual accomplished mindset to a working as worship mindset. And the steps were gratitude first, that's step 0. And then we start dedicating our actions towards God. We let God act as an instrument through us, and we finally become one with dedication. I hope this talk has offered you a helpful perspective on this half Pada. And thank you very much to Amarji and the Booklight team for giving me this opportunity to speak. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Anjali. Thank you so much for sharing. And last, we have Aparna, who's also part of our Booklight team. So Aparna is currently a junior at University of Georgia. She's studying biology and English and is associated with the Alpharetta Center out there in Georgia. So Hari Om, Aparna.
Hari Om. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. So following up with Anjali and Sahana's amazing talks, I wanted to take a little bit of a different angle and convey what I have been reflecting on, because this topic of Karma Yoga, although I have heard it through the satsangs and through the reflection, I was finding a sort of mental block as I was trying to apply it. And something that kept knocking around in my head was Shubhaniji's definition of Bhagavan and Ishvara, of how Bhagavan's definition in my life can change the texture of my actions. And I wanted to see how, one, we can define Bhagavan, how we can apply Bhagavan's definition in our daily lives, and how that's an easy way, an easy entry point into Karma Yoga. And then lastly, look at some words of saints who have described Bhagavan and seen Bhagavan with their own eyes, and how their vision has been transformed through their knowledge, direct knowledge of Bhagavan. So first, let's start with the definition of Bhagavan. Shubhaniji mentioned that Bhagavan is totality, but we begin our journey into Karma Yoga with our Ishta Devata, our chosen deity. I wanted to explore the relationship between these two definitions because upon further reflection, I realized that these aren't incompatible ideas. In fact, they're necessary consequences of one another. If I take one to be true, the other has to be true too. So let's suppose I take it to be true that the personal deity that I've chosen in my heart is Bhagavan. Well, what's so special about me that Bhagavan's only sitting in my heart? You know, like if Bhagavan's in my heart, then Bhagavan's in your heart, and Bhagavan's in my neighbor's heart, and Bhagavan's in somebody's heart in Zambia. Like Bhagavan's in everybody's heart, and not only in people. Why would Bhagavan be only in people's heart? Bhagavan would be in every being's heart. So like every cell is part of an organism, every jiva is part of Ishvara. So it is a necessary consequence that my personal Bhagavan sitting in my heart that I see in front of me is also everywhere. And if we work it backwards to forwards, if I take totality to be Bhagavan, well, I'm part of totality. Bhagavan has to be in me too. And I can't ignore the fact that Bhagavan, yeah, okay, Bhagavan's running the world outside and I get to do whatever I want. No, Bhagavan also has a hand of grace inside me. So this reflection reveals that these two ideas are corollaries. They're not in opposition, they're not in tension, they're actually in perfect alignment in one another. And actually, we can see this in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 7. In verses 36 to 37, Lord Krishna yawns at Maya Yashoda, that famous story, and she sees the whole universe in his mouth. And you know, she's looking at him, putting him to sleep, and he's her little blue baby boy. And suddenly she sees all the stars and all the planets and everything inside his mouth. And she looks closer and she sees her putting him to sleep inside him. It's like Bhagavan only is saying, don't think of me of either this or that. I am everything. So now we can see that these definitions aren't so different, that they really do speak to each other really well. How does this help me practically apply Karma Yoga? How does this lead me to naturally think in the paradigm of Karma Yoga? So let's say I take this definition of Bhagavan as totality. Instead of seeing, as I was accustomed to, objects as objects in their own right, people as people in their own right, I have to do the mental work of equating every object and person to Bhagavan. And then everything becomes divinized. When I'm walking around campus, a tree isn't just a tree is Bhagavan. When I'm talking to my professor, I'm talking to Bhagavan. When I'm talking to my roommates, I'm talking to Bhagavan. That vision, if I contemplate on Bhagavan as totality, naturally, this thought will come more and more that I'm not really interacting with things. I'm interacting with the divine. And cool, that's all well and good, but why do I have to give everything to Bhagavan? What's the point? Like, okay, Bhagavan's out there. I was remembering a talk by Swami Prakashanandaji, and Swamiji was talking about what I owe to the world. He said, imagine studying a subject. You pick up a textbook. A bunch of people probably wrote that textbook. So what had to happen for you to study this subject? Well, those people had to be born. They had to have parents. They had to have mentors who nourished them. I had to be born. I had to have parents. I had to have people who guide me in the right direction. And then those people had to have parents. And then, I don't know, they like ate food or something. So farmers were involved. And you see that they also had to have parents. And there's this infinite chain of cause and effect that never stops to get me to where I am now. Swamiji said in the lectures that in the scriptures, it is said that the whole Brahmand works together so that a single ant can take a single breath. And if the whole universe is doing that for a little ant, wow, what must the universe be doing for all the good in my life to happen, right? And suddenly when, like Anjali was saying, I get that step 0 of gratitude, it's not even a question of what I owe to Bhagavan. All this totality that is giving to me, automatically I think, okay, I got to give back. But upon further reflection, like, this doesn't just stop there. Once I think about, okay, everything is coming to me through Bhagavan. Bhagavan is taking the name and form, but the name and form is really impermanent. And it's really Bhagavan who is the common denominator or the through line to all of these names and forms interacting with me. Yes, I have to treat the name and form as Bhagavan, but I don't have to treat the name and form as permanent. And what I'm after is permanent happiness. I don't ever want to be sad, like ever. So I need happiness all the time. And instead of going to Bhagavan, I'm going to these names and forms, and I'm giving them everything that I have, hoping that I somehow get permanent happiness out of this temporary name and form. But actually, I should be giving all of my effort to the Bhagavan behind the name and form, and then I will gain some semblance of lasting joy. And when I think about this even more, I think, well, hey, I have a name and form. This body, mind, and intellect has a name and form. This body, mind, and intellect is also temporary. So the Bhagavan inside of me is the only one who can give me reliable happiness if I take that time and effort to try to know him, because he is the only permanent and blissful one. I am going around and I'm begging for little tidbits of joy from stupid things like Pop-Tarts when Bhagavan is right here all the time. And it just hit me when Shubhaniji said, we have to do more sadhana, because I said, oh, if I was thinking about Bhagavan more, I wouldn't be thinking about that Pop-Tart in that cabinet right now. I'd be thinking about Bhagavan. And slowly my desires would diminish, my vasanas would diminish, and Bhagavan would be the only one there. So speaking of Bhagavan being the only one there, let's listen to some people who've actually realized that. One example is Bhagavan Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Ji, whose Ishta Devata was Kali Ma. He was a saint of Dakshineshwar, Bengal, and his words are recorded by his disciples in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And the attitude that Bhagavan had towards Mother Kali was that of a child to the mother. But even so, he says, and he would get lost in Mother Kali. He would lose consciousness to the outer world, and he would just speak. And one day he was talking to her, and he was glorifying her, and he was saying, oh, Mother, you are verily Brahman, and you are verily Shakti. You are Purusha, and you are Prakriti. You are Virat. You are the absolute, and you do manifest yourself as the relative. You are verily the 24 cosmic principles. So Bhagavan Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Ji reveals or expounds on Mother Kali's nature as the infinite. But at the same time, at another point when, again, he's lost consciousness, he's talking to Mother Kali, he's actually saying, Mother, don't give me Brahmajnana. He says, I don't want to be a dry sadhu. Am I not your child and naturally timid? I must have my mother. Don't let me go. He talks to her, and the narrator says there wasn't a dry eye in the room. You know, he was begging her as a child will beg its mother for her to be around. So you can see he has this relationship with his personal Ishta, which is so sweet and so singular, yet Bhagavan has this infinite view of her as the total, as the 24 cosmic principles. A similar vision we see in Swami Ramdas Ji. His experiences are written in Quest of God. And Swami Ramdas Ji also was dedicated to his personal Ishtadevata Ram Bhagavan. Throughout the book, we get details of his taking journeys through all these pilgrimage spots. He also went to Dakshineshwar, he went to Tirupati, Taraknath, Benares, Kashi, etc., and he revels in the form of Bhagavan as personal Bhagavan. But at the same time, his vision of God just doesn't stop there. His vision of God is so immense. So one time he's going to the train and some ticket master is haggling him for a ticket. He's like, you don't have a ticket and you speak English, so you have to have a ticket. It shows you you have some money somewhere, right? And he's like, no, I'm a sadhu. And he says, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm looking for God. And the ticket master says, oh yeah, show me where God is then. And Swami Ramdas Ji says, behold, he's here, standing in front of me. And the inspector says, where? What are you talking about? And it's written in the book, he says, here, pointed out Ramdas, smiling. And he patted on the broad chest of the inspector himself. In the tall figure standing in front, that is, in yourself, Ramdas clearly sees God who is everywhere. So Swami Ramdas Ji says to the ticket master, what are you talking about? Right in front of me, I see Bhagavan. You could see Bhagavan everywhere. So through these experiences of saints, we can see that their direct experiences confirm everything that we've been studying, that Bhagavan is total and Bhagavan is personal. Bhagavan is from the intellect, can be seen or approached through the intellect, and Bhagavan can be seen and approached from the heart. And we can see what a beautiful vision of life they have when they synthesize all of these ideals. So in conclusion, we looked at the definitions of Bhagavan, how they are corollaries of one another, how they provide an easy entranceway into Karma Yoga, and how they have manifested themselves in the lives of saints and their words. Hari Om, thank you for this opportunity to reflect.
Hari Om, Aparna. Wow. See, the only problem I have with all three talks today is that you're going to scare away the people for next week. How are they supposed to follow that up? So Sadhana, Anjali, and Parna, thank you so much for sharing. We really, really, really enjoy it. If you watch everyone's faces right now, we're all just, really, really zoned in. Now we have an opportunity for us to participate, those of you who are on our Zoom feed, to ask questions. If you have any questions for the three speakers, please feel free to ask. I also will take a moment while you gather your questions. I'll share. Let's see. Oh no, Zoom is giving me trouble. Can someone else on our Booklight team share the flyer? Is that possible? Actually, Aparna, I'll have you share. So our next session will be, it's not about me, on next Monday. So that will be our next satsang by Shubhani Ji. And that will be on March 29th, exactly 1 week from today. There we go. Aparna also happens to be the one who helps make our flyers so pretty. So now I'll hand it off to anybody who has questions. Do we have any questions in the chat yet? Please feel free to message them over to me, Shubhani Ji, in general. Shubhani Ji, anything on your end?
So I have a couple of questions in mind. So the first one, so I loved everything that happened today. I had a little internet glitch, so I was switching back and forth, but I really, really enjoyed everything. So my first question is to Sahana. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? One doesn't have to change their job, but change their attitude. Can you just elaborate, like, what if somebody was in a challenging situation, having a difficult time in their jobs? How would you approach that?
Sure. Hari Om, everyone. So for this, what I was saying is that everyone and everything that we're serving is Bhagavan alone. So any job that I'm doing or any job that we're doing is serving that Bhagavan. And we just maybe need to change the attitude in which we look at it. And we can see that sometimes maybe we might not think that we're in the right place, but Bhagavan knows the exact place that we should be in to serve. So there's something here, there's something wherever we are that Bhagavan has put us in to learn in that place. So even whatever we're in is the right job for us to grow in some way. And that might not be the ultimate place for us, but wherever that place is right now is the place that that person can grow from. So that's what I would tell someone who maybe feels like they're not in the right place right now. They're able to serve Bhagavan in some way because Bhagavan is this whole totality. So they're able to serve, and they may need to change that attitude so that way they can see that as Bhagavan. And I shared a couple thoughts on how they can do that, and raising the intention, remembering Bhagavan through those actions, and releasing the results. And that Bhagavan knows exactly where the spot is for us. So even this, though it might not be the ultimate goal for them, it is something for them to serve in the current moment. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. My next question is for Anjali. So Anjali, being that a lot of us are in step 0 and need to still cultivate a sense of gratitude, how does one cultivate that gratitude? What steps can we take to be thankful? How does one realize gratitude in their lives?
Hari Om Shubhani ji, thank you for asking me that question. It's one that I'm still figuring out every day. But personally, I come from that individual accomplishment mindset that I was talking about. So it feels like a lot of the things I worry about are, what can I do next? What can I keep? How can I improve the way that I already look? So one thing that I currently do in order to kind of stop that track in its thoughts is simply be aware of when I'm thinking in a cycle that's like that. If I can catch myself thinking, how does this look on my LinkedIn? How will this look to other people? Or think, if I'm doing something purely based on its appearance and I can catch myself thinking that way, I can switch my mindset. So I guess one of my first tips would be that if you find yourself thinking in a way, if you can become more aware of the patterns in which you think of that aren't already in a gratitude kind of mindset, then learn to become more aware of them, learn to notice them, and eventually you can switch that mindset from one of how will I look because of the action I'm doing to how can I be grateful that I have this opportunity. So that would be one way I can think of cultivating more gratitude, is noticing when I'm not being gracious and then switching my thoughts to a gracious mindset. As for more tips and tricks, I will update you when I think of them myself. But thank you, Hari Om.
That's a very nice tip, Anjali. Thank you. And if anybody has questions, please feel free. Otherwise, I will keep asking. So Aparna, I have a question for you. And forgive me if you answer this in some way. I had some internet issues. But what would you say to someone who's, still focusing on an Ishta Devata, and they want to sort of go towards seeing that Ishta Devata as totality? How does one do that?
That's a great question, since I'm still focused on trying to think of my Ishta Devata. I would say the thing that helps me most, first and foremost, is Satsang. And there's Bhagwan's pretty obvious about what his true nature is in the scriptures. Like, we just kind of gotta, when I read it, I'm like, oh, it's like, he says it like all the time. So if I'm focused on the form and name of Bhagwan, that's good. But then if I start listening more and more to what Bhagwan is saying and what others have said about Bhagavan, if I grow that love in my heart first, then I'll want to know more. And then when I learn more about Bhagavan from Bhagwan's own Leelas or from the words of saints, then I will get that information about, or that knowledge, or that resolve to see Bhagavan other places other than just in the idol. The other thing was the trick that Amarji gave me last time, so I'm kind of cheating. But to just, if I repeat Bhagavan's name over and over again, then while I'm doing other tasks, then naturally, if he comes to mind all the time, I'll see him in all kinds of things. Like I'll see him on this light shining off the bark of a tree, or I'll see him in my good friend, or whatever. I'll see him in good things. Eventually I'll start seeing him in bad things too. I'll see the reason that come in for the bad things that happen. And eventually, I guess it just expands naturally as Bhagavan takes more and more ownership of my actions, or as I surrender more and more. That's all I got.
Thank you. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Over to Amarji.
The one really nice thing about our tradition, well, not just one nice thing, we have many nice things, but one of the nice things that's within our tradition is that we encourage plagiarism profusely. Meaning, if you like what we have, you please steal it, right? And we see this because all of our knowledge is aparushe. It is that which is not even of human creation. So someone has shared something at one point, you take it, you use it, and then you share with someone else. So not cheating, Aparna. I don't think there's anything left on my end, Shubhanji. I think this all my questions have been answered. I really enjoyed all three of you speaking and answering your questions accordingly. I will encourage for next time, those of you who are inspired, now we've had 9 speakers, 10 including Shubhanji, who have been sharing their thoughts. So next week after Satsang, I'll ask again for 3 people to step up. So I hope you all feel inspired and wanting to share your thoughts as well. Don't be scared. We'll work with you. We'll make sure you have the proper resources. And that way you can share in front of everybody. So you don't have to make that decision now, but after Satsang next week, we'll ask that question. And I hope to see you raising your hand. I think that's it, Shubhanji.
I will share one thing and then you can close. Chinmaya Mission West has a Indian Language Fest, which is this Saturday. So those of you who speak native languages or your regional languages, I highly encourage you to come. There's going to be a lot of Swaminis, Swamins, Brahmacharians, speakers, our Sandipani graduates who are going to speak. And there's going to be cultural programs and games and all kinds of things. And we have 9 languages. So I highly encourage all of you to attend. So please see if you can make it. It's on Saturday, March 27, from 6 to 8 Eastern, 5 to 7 Central, and 3 to 5 Pacific. And this is the website. And of course, those of you who are interested to help out or attend the eBal Vihar summer camp, the registrations are officially open and we are always looking for volunteers. And you all know it's going to be on Tulsi Ramayana. So we're very excited. I can't wait to pick up Ramayana. I'm so excited. So I hope that you could all join us in that. Okay, so back to Amarji.
And now we'll just do concluding prayer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Hari Om, everyone. We'll see you next week, Monday, for our next satsang. Hari Om.